So Firefly is finally here, and after testing her for a while, I think she's quite unique character, because even though she is already decent, the current roster still cannot fully utilize all parts of her kit. Right now, she can work both as sub DPS and a DPS depending on the team, but some parts of her kit are locked behind the new Lucent mark. And currently, the game doesn't really have any characters that can properly utilize it. So because of that, most Firefly teams right now are basically forced into her giant sword build. In this video, I will go over Firefly's current state, the problems surrounding her kit, the teams that actually work right now, and the current situation for players who want to build her. So by the end of the video, you should have much better understanding of Firefly based on my own testing, early calculations, gameplay experience, and discussions with high-level players and theory crafters. Firefly is a less versatile character, which means she can function in the support slot as both DPS and sub-DPS depending on the team. And in general, versatile characters simply are not very good at main slot DPS. And after testing Firefly myself, I don't really think she changed that. At most, she might have some future value from providing support while being played in the main slot, but currently, there aren't any characters that can properly take advantage of that. So as a support slot character, Firefly can provide less damage boost, less damage taken, attack buff, and very strong mark application. So in terms of utility, she already has a pretty solid foundation, similar to other versatile characters. But unique part of Firefly is how one of her builds scales. Normally, versatile characters mostly scale with skill damage, regardless of which build you use. And for Firefly, her build 1 of Flying Blade still works like a normal versatile character and scales with skill damage. But her build 2, or Giant Sword, is completely different because it scales with auto attack damage, even though she is still being played from the support slot. Her ultimate is also pretty unique because it refreshes her skill cooldown, which might become much more important later once people figure out how to properly optimize her rotations. So before we talk about the teams, we need to talk about the main issues with this character. Normally, Lux characters only have one mark trigger interaction, which summons Thunderbolt after triggering Lux marks. But Firefly introduces a completely new Lux trigger called Lucent. The problem is that currently nobody except Firefly in the main slot can generate it. And because of that, parts of her Flying Sword build currently cannot function properly since the build depends on Lucent generation. So even though Firefly technically has two different builds, right now, the Giant Sword build is the only one worth using. Another issues come from Firefly's support potential, Luminous Onslaught. This potential requires continuous mark activations to maintain its 10 stacks of debuff. But the one important requirement is that Firefly herself also needs to stay on the field. And that becomes a problem because there is a pretty large gap between each of her skill rotations. So even with strong mark trigger characters like Shia or Laru, the stacks tend to expire after Firefly leaves the field, forcing you to build it back up again. There is potential workaround by using Blade of Falling Petals, which can extend Firefly's field time up to 100%. But from our current testing so far, it still isn't consistent enough. Sometimes there is almost no gap at all, while other times Firefly still leaves the field long enough for the stacks to expire. So right now, maintaining full uptime on Luminous Onslaught is still somewhat inconsistent, even in the teams with strong mark triggers. So with all of that in mind, Firefly's strongest team is Shia, Firefly, and Telia. In this setup, Firefly basically replaces Minova as the sub-DPS, similar to how Nasuka, Otoha, and Donna function in other element teams. For Firefly's team, the most important support potentials are Domain of Purity and Luminous Onslaught. Domain of Purity provides around 70% less damage to the entire team, while Luminous Onslaught gives additional support value through mark activations. Although as mentioned earlier, maintaining full uptime can be still somewhat inconsistent right now. The rest of her potential are for Firefly's personal damage. Now from my testing, Firefly's personal damage in this team actually isn't that high. She only contributes around 20% of the team's total damage, depending on how well you play Shia. And honestly, top Shia players might push Firefly's contribution even lower than that. But I don't think this is a problem. Tilia heavily buffs the main slot character anyway, so naturally, most of the buffs are going into Shia. So even though Firefly's personal damage is relatively low, her actual value still comes from supporting Shia while contributing decent damage herself. Now, for those of you who don't have Shia or are planning to skip her rerun, things become a bit more awkward. Because when it comes to the current roster, there really aren't many existing characters that work particularly well with Firefly yet. Right now, your alternatives are Minova, Jinglin, and Laru. For Minova Team, she is mainly being used as sub DPS in the main slot while also supporting Firefly at the same time. The idea is somewhat similar to how Canets work in Nasuka Team, where the main slot character helps amplify support slot DPS while still contributing decent personal damage. For this setup, the important Minova pots are Board Tricks, More Than Just Pretty, and Light Burn. Board Tricks and More Than Just Pretty both provide lux damage taken, which helps amplify Firefly's personal damage. Meanwhile, Light Burn reduces Minova's skill cooldown, which is important for maintaining the debuff uptime from Luminous Onslaught. The rest is mostly focused on attack buffs to help increase Minova's personal damage, especially her mark damage, since she has pretty high base mark at 301%. Jinglin is much more damage-oriented option compared to Minova. In this setup, Jinglin functions as the dedicated mark DPS, while Firefly still contributes both personal damage and support utility from support slot. For this team, the important Jinglin potentials are Conductor Conversion, Leakage Protection, and her ultimate pots. Conductor Conversion provides around 400% mark damage, while Leakage Protection and ultimate pots are mainly used to buff Jinglin's attack. So unlike Minova, where she functions as both support and DPS, Jinglin in this team is centered around maximizing her personal damage to mark damage. As for Laru, I honestly don't have enough experience with this character to properly recommend a build myself. The only person currently testing this team is Nitro Tom, or many of you know him as Nasuna Get Preg. And based on his testing and early numbers so far, she doesn't seem as strong as Minova or Jinglin right now. The only area where this character does better is consistency in mark activation. So if you are interested in this team, I would recommend following Nitro for future updates once he finishes his cook with this team. So with all these options, the next question becomes, which one should you actually pick if you don't have Shia? And honestly, I think this mostly depends on how much you are willing to invest into these characters. Because realistically, all of these options are currently temporary replacements until you either pull Shia or we eventually get future Lux characters that can fully enable Firefly's kit. So if you want to spend the least amount of resources possible while still making Firefly work, then I would go with Minova, because even without investing into her personal damage, she still provides useful support through Lux damage taken. Meanwhile, for Jinglin and Laru, you need to invest into both of them, because their role in Firefly teams depend more on their personal damage. And honestly, this also leads to another important question. Should you even pull Firefly in the first place? And as we already talked about earlier, Firefly currently doesn't fully work with most existing characters in the game, except for Shia. And even then, Shia can only play with her giant sword build. So if you do plan to pull Firefly, I think the most important thing you need to ask yourself is, are you comfortable dealing with the uncertainty of waiting for future characters that can fully enable Lucent? And those future characters would most likely need to be either Vanguard or Versatile in order to trigger Lucent. Now, based on the release pattern so far, the next limited character is supposed to be Terra Vanguard, which would complete the current limited Vanguard and Versatile lineup for every element. And after that, we will probably start entering the support Solar era, where future limited releases shift toward support characters instead. So if we assume that this release pattern continues, then the next question becomes, When are we actually going to get another last Vanguard or Versatile that can fully enable Firefly? Or maybe that character ends up being a 4-star character instead. So yeah, there's still a lot of uncertainty right now. And personally, I don't really see very high pool value for Firefly at the moment, unless you already have Shia, or are planning to pull Shia as well. So overall, Firefly is definitely a decent character right now, but she is also one of the most roster-dependent characters we had in a while. If you already have Shia, then things are pretty straightforward, because Firefly already has a strong team that works well with her giant sword build. But once you remove Shia from the equation, things become much more uncertain. Most of Firefly's current alternatives are functioning as temporary solutions until we eventually get future characters that can fully enable other parts of her kit. And because of that, I think your decision mostly comes down to how much uncertainty you are willing to deal with. Are you willing to wait for potentially several patches for future Lux characters? Because after finishing Firefly's damage model, things honestly start looking really rough once Shia is removed from the team. So with all of that in mind, I do have to ask all of you who already pulled Firefly or are planning to pull her. Are you also planning to pull Shia as well? And if not, which character are you planning to use with Firefly for the time being? Personally, I only plan to cover Shia and Minova teams for Firefly, because right now, those are the two most reasonable teams for her in my opinion. So let me know what you guys are planning to do with Firefly teams in the comments. And that's pretty much everything I know about this character. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Burger Burger Model.